It is recording. Good. Yeah, you got it. Oh. All right. I'm gonna put my phone on do not disturb. Record. And what's your time looking like? Because it's 6 o'clock.
Yeah. So by 7.
Perfect. I got you. All right. I'm gonna just go into it. You ready?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Welcome to Something Positive for Positive People. I'm Courtney Brain. Something Positive for Positive People is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that serves as the go-to resource that is a sexual hub of communication resources for people who are navigating stigma to communicate about their sexual health. Right now, there is a survey up and running for people who are living with HSV. If you can go and take that right now, I would really appreciate it. That can be found at www.spfpp.org/survey. When you click the clip to go to the survey, there is a tiny blue box. If you are taking this from a mobile device, there's a tiny blue box that you will see to the right of your screen. I don't know why it does this, but you have to press that, and then it will take you to the consent form, and you'll be allowed to begin the survey. I apologize for the inconvenience. The organization that we got the survey through is not able to fix that. And at this point, if they did, we'd probably lose all the data that we have. But at this point, we're at about 400 responses, which we are looking to get to about 2,000 before the end of the year. So I think we can do that. We got 1,100 in a couple of months in 2021 when I did this. Considering the size of the audience has grown and there's a lot more active participation, I think we can get more. All right. And support groups are weekly for Patreon subscribers. You can go to patreon.com/SPFPP. We meet Mondays at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And the fourth Monday of the month is open to anyone who is not a member as well. All right. Now, we got that out of the way. I have a very, very special guest here, Marla Stewart. And I want to, before I let you introduce yourself, I want to first thank you for the experience of Sex Down South. From me reaching out, I meant to look at the message I sent you, but I was panicking because somebody told me, you should apply for this, you should try to be a speaker. And I remember you opened it up, you told me you got an hour to apply, submit your application, and then you were closing it again. I was like, oh, let me do this. And I was just so thankful that you were willing to do that. So I very much appreciate it. I was able to get in, I was able to make it out there, and I had a very wonderful experience that I'll speak about after I let you introduce yourself, how you would like to be introduced.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy you applied too. I think, Jess is one of my good friends. So if it wasn't for Jess, it was like, you need Courtney there. I was just like, okay, you better hustle and get this in. But anyway, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Marla Renee Stewart. I am a certified sexologist and sexual strategist. I help people with their sex lives. I specialize in seduction, communication, enhancing people's sex skills, and I'm particularly catered to folks in alternative sexual communities like Kinksters, LGBTQIA folks, swingers, non-monogamous folks, and yeah, that's a little bit of me there.
Yeah, and we're supposed to do this podcast a little while later, but then I just so happened to find out you were important. So I moved back here 2-ish weeks ago, and I met up with an old friend that I met through rope classes. She's big into rope, and we let each other know when things are going on. So we met up for lunch just to catch up, and she mentioned that you and Luna were here for the Kinky Tapas class, and I was like, how you know that? Like, what? And so when she told me, I hurried up and pulled my phone out and emailed you. And I was like, hey, if you want to do this in person, we can. So I'm glad we're able to make this happen. So now we can do hopefully some video stuff and make little clips out of it as well. So I had 3 main points that I wanted to cover with you. Sex Down South, that experience, as well as what got you, how did you even start this? The second point is speaking to your background in public health, and more so segueing into herpes stigma from a public health perspective. And then the third thing was kink as a treatment for trauma, because that was probably one of the most mind-blowing experiences that I had at Sex Down South when I was in Honest Lene's class, and they had said that. I was like, oh, okay. So for starters, I wanted to share this. So you and I were talking a little bit before this, and you mentioned how something like Sex Down South can be a little bit, to a straight man or a straight black man. Did you, was that what you said? I don't want to mix your words.
Yeah. I think sometimes straight people might get a little overwhelmed by how queer it is. And so if they're not used to queer people, sometimes it's just, and we center queer, folks. So I think sometimes people are kind of, when they're not the center, sometimes that affects people in different ways,
Yeah. I know what you mean, because there was a workshop there by Mango Love called Worshipping a Black Man's Body. And I remember thinking, I was like, oh, that's probably not for me. Like thinking I shouldn't go to that class. And when I got there, I was like, oh, this was actually like centering black men. Like it didn't matter straight, queer, anything else. It was just like one of the first things she had us do was stand up in the middle. I think there were like 9 of us in there. And maybe 30 people who weren't black men. And she had everybody, there were roses on the tables, and without giving away her whole workshop, she had people take a rose and walk up and give it to one of us and like say something positive, give us a hug.
Oh, wow.
We sat back down, she asked us, how did y'all feel? Everybody was like, uncomfortable, like, everybody was just like, oh, it feels so weird. And without giving her workshop away, like the time that we spent in there, like learning, hearing from other black men, not just from the sense of like sexuality, but more so intimacy and like the discomfort with intimacy in this foreign way of receiving. So with that background, I can now say from my experience walking out of that, I realized how much of a struggle it has always been for me to receive, but coming into this queer environment where I think most straight black men would probably have been uncomfortable or overwhelmed even. I think that was nothing compared to the discomfort of like the emotions that were stirred up from this idea of people giving and being able to go into this space and like ask for what you want and see the intentionality. Like those were more uncomfortable things for me than seeing anything else that you were seeing. So that to say, like, is that kind of what the intention of Sex Down South is, besides from just, the theme being sex in the way that people generally view sex?
Yeah, the theme really is around stretching people, right? Really pushing people. I'm a pusher, you know what I mean? So like, I think that stems from me and even Tia sometimes gets a little uncomfortable with being pushed. And for me, I'm like, people need to be pushed because they need to experience something new. They need to explore something new about themselves. And that's what Sex Down South is. You can go into all sorts of different workshops and stretch yourself a little. You know what I mean? Like my wife, she hasn't been to the last couple of conferences. But I remember when she went to her first conference, I was like, do something that stretches you. She's like, okay, fine. She's like, she doesn't do anything like if we go to anything, it's because I don't want to go. You know what I mean? And so she's like, I went to the fisting class, and she was like, it was actually a pretty good class. She's like, but she was like, there was a lot going on, And I was like, I get it, but also you learn something new, and even if you don't want to do that thing, right? Like there's an opportunity to learn something new, to stretch yourself, to see how you can be in what kind of environment. And so I think that's really for anybody. We really try to push people to get out of their comfort zones so that they can explore something new about themselves. And I think that's been working for us well. There was an email we just got from a heterosexual couple, and, they said, this is the first time we could actually go to the bathroom together and like do what we needed to do and then come out of the bathroom together. And she was like, although this doesn't seem like a big deal, like it was a really big deal for us because, it wasn't sort of like we go into our little silos, it's like you know, we did the thing and it was okay, and we came back out. And in something just as small as that, like just having, you know, gender neutral bathrooms, or just having bathrooms that, you know, you can go into and not be, you know, policed around, I think is important, whether you're straight or not, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just the simplicity of something like that really stretches even just the perspective of a person that, you know, might not have otherwise attended this conference or something like it. I wanted to bring you into this space and sort of expose my community that I'm working with to this sort of environment, because I think that so much of our, how do I want to say this? I think that something positive for positive people as a podcast has also created this sense of comfort for people who might be navigating herpes stigma, to the point where on a weekly basis, this is really what they feel like they need. They wait for the next podcast episode to release, and they get like that little hit of whatever it is that they need to make it to the next week. I've been doing this for almost 7 years now, and I can't imagine, like, to me, that is the equivalent of waiting on a cure. And I can't imagine what my life would have looked like for the last 7 years, waiting for a cure for herpes before I started living my life. So to me, what stretching myself outside of this bubble of comfort that is being within the herpes community or exclusive herpes support, it looks like venturing off into other things that demonstrate other aspects of sexuality. And in doing so, like, it's even brought me into this realm of like emotional connection and vulnerability and intimacy, and even being able to see, like, looking at how other people engage with other people and like learning things from that as well. So all of that to say, you know, your space has created such value to me that I'm able to bring my own lived experiences into this community, and hopefully like have some people go, maybe I want to attend a workshop or learn something or stretch myself in some way. So like that's the kind of influence you have, in the case you haven't heard it today. Yeah, but no, I appreciate it, and yeah, thank you for creating that. And so the initial intention with the first Sex Down South, like, can you recall those days? Like what creating that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the story really is about Tia and I, right? So Tia had recruited me for an event that she was doing. So she was doing production of different events, and it was a Black women's sexuality magazine. So she had, I guess, Googled, and I popped up, and she was like, oh, she fell in love with my bald head, is what she says. And then, so I was like, yeah, I'll do a workshop, of course. You know, I want to be a part of this event. And then she was like, what are these aphrodisiacs you have on your site? And I was like, yeah, I have these aphrodisiacs, you know? And she's like, I want to buy them all. So she did. And she was like, oh my God, they work. They're so good. And we just became, it was just kind of like, we were connected. Like, I don't even know how to explain it, but we got to know each other. And so we were like, we should do something together. And I was like, well, my birthday's coming up. And so we did, she's like, how about a carnival? So we did a carnival for my birthday at my house. We had 200 people at my house. I had a Mexican rock band. I had flame dancers. I had, cherry pie eating contest. We were dancing, barbecue, fried Twinkies, fried Oreos. I had a mobile spank booth. We had a tube of love is what we called it. It was just like this hula hoop with a fabric hanging from my tree. And then somebody would go inside and I would call, hands! And people would come up and touch the person who was inside. And so it was just like a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so we kept doing events like that. We had an Empowering the Pussy party, a No Pants Prince party, like all sorts of stuff. And then we were on my couch, you know, one day like this. And we were like, I want to do something bigger. And I was like, I want to do like a 3-day conference. You know, I'm coming from the more academic, educator side, more science, research side. She's coming from more enthusiast side, right? Like, she's like one of the people who, the non-monogamous people I'd be teaching to do an oral sex workshop or something. You know what I mean? Like, we were coming from both of these angles. And so I was just like, I want to do a conference that is just like both of us, you know? And so that's, you know, she was like, sex down south. And I was like, yes. And we just didn't know how to run a conference. So I got a mentor. We just started doing our research, and we were like, recruited a team. You know, we were like, okay, we're going to go in as a business on this. People were like, I'm out. So with the $200 that we had, we made it happen. And I mean, I can't tell you, it's nothing short of Black Girl Magic, because we had no money. And we were like, how are we going to put this conference on? We ended up getting an AV sponsor. So someone helped with AV. I was in grad school at the time at Georgia State. So I was getting equipment from Georgia State. Like we hustled to like make it happen. And it was beautiful. And so here we are, you know, with our baby 9 years later.
I thought it was 10.
10 years next year.
Are we not counting the pandemic, like skip a year or something?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, this is our 9th year. So 10 years is next year.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So our first concert was 2015. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Coming out of whatever what were you doing before the conference? Is that like, where was your public health background?
Yes.
That transition.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I was in graduate school, and while I was in graduate school, I started my business, Velvet Lips. So it's Velvet Lips Sex Ed, and that is basically, like I said, helping people, doing workshops, doing one-on-one coaching, couples coaching, relationship coaching. And so while I was in graduate school, I was in graduate school for sociology. But I had a friend that was like, you need to go to public health because the graduate research assistantships pay more in public health. So I was like, great. So I applied, I got in, best thing I could have done. So I was a GRA in the School of Public Health, working in the Community Research Center. And so I was able to get all of my training and everything. So I became an HIV educator, tester. I'm a phlebotomist, I'm certified phlebotomist, taking people's blood. And we used to do outreach and recruitment around public health. So that was, and of course I, took some classes and things. So that was my background. And then I also had colleagues who were in epidemiology. So I'm also soaking up all of the information that they're giving me while I'm in grad school about all the different, all the different STDs or STIs, and like all of the stages and all of the things. And I think I also had some of that educator background already, but it really enhanced with the public health knowledge, because the epidemiology actually goes into sort of the stages of syphilis, right? Like you don't get that in a pamphlet when you go to any clinic. It doesn't say step 1, you're gonna have a sore. Step 2, your palms, like you're gonna get rashes on your palms and feet. Step 3, you're gonna get alopecia or lose your hair. Like it doesn't give you those things. And so I think that was really, really helpful for me to navigate my everyday life. I was also bartending at a restaurant.
You a hustler.
Yeah. So, it's like having my friends and also seeing these different signs and things and being like, hey, I think you got to go get tested. This is actually a symptom of this thing. And so, so that's sort of my background knowledge behind that.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have not only the pleasure perspective and background in education, but also the safety, for lack of a better word, education. What does a blend of these two educational components really look like? And just for a little bit more background on my asking, when we talk about safety and in the public health field, it's wear condoms,
right,
get tested, know your status. That's all we pretty much get. And then from the pleasure perspective, I think that when we take more of a pleasure angle, it seems to, I don't want to say completely be avoidant of the safety protocols, but I think that there's like a happy medium here, and I think that maybe you would be the person to exchange some dialogue with to see what bridging that gap looks like between safety and pleasure, because I think that people say things like, oh, I don't want to talk about STIs or testing because it kills the mood. And then on the other hand, it's like, oh, this is so hot, let's not ruin the moment. So there's kind of like a barrier between the two, like that implies you can't have both. What can you say to that?
I can say that's bullshit that you can't have both, because I've been in that situation, right? So I've been with partners who've had herpes. I've been with casual partners who've had herpes. I've had, and I think and I think part of that is personal. My personal experience also lends to that. And I think when people can't speak to that from a personal experience, I think it's harder to understand, because when they say something like, "Oh, when let's have the STI conversation, it's gonna kill the mood." Absolutely not, right? Absolutely not. It does not kill the mood. Like, if you're in the mood, you're in the mood, right? And what do we need to do to like keep going in this mood? So for me, it was important. It's always been important to have that conversation and be upfront about it. Because of my background, having the knowledge around HSV 1 and 2 and all of that stuff. I'm so sorry. I had a flashback of college. I was in theater. We kind of talked about this earlier.
So for background, so Marla and I were just talking on the way to starting to record, and I mentioned what my jobs were outside of here, my part-time jobs, and I work with a bunch of actors as a standardized or simulated patient at medical universities. And I mentioned, like, yeah, I think I'm learning. The more I talk to them, like, the more kinky they are too. And she's like, yeah. And now here we are.
So when I was in theater, I had a comedy. We had a art of comedy class, and we all had to perform a song, like do a parody of a song. And my song was I Got Herpes Too, with Christina Aguilera. What's that song? All I Want Is You. All I Want Is You. That song by Christina Aguilera. So my version of it was, I got herpes too, not number one, baby. I got herpes too, it itches like crazy. I got herpes too, oh baby, don't be shy. You better cross the line. I'm gonna love you, boy, and give herpes to you. No, I know that was awful. But it's an art of comedy class, it was for jokes and shit. Yeah. So anyway, it was just, sorry, that was the flashback. But I all that to say, like, I think it's super important just to, of course, have those conversations. And then just know, like, hey, what are the things that we need to do to make this happen? Because I really want to touch your body. I really want to, what do we need to do? And like I said, I've had long-term partners that have had herpes. I've had short casual stints. And I think navigating that, it's really about putting your mind at ease. I think when I have clients who maybe are newly contracted herpes or have had herpes and are still kind of really struggling, it's the sense of like, my body isn't mine anymore. It's for some people it has been like such a chokehold on them. And then I have clients who are like, it's just, it's part of who I am, and like, here we are, and I don't know why some people get really, really affected and why some people are kind of like, it is what it is, like, and that's okay. And I think, like, as a person who does not have herpes, right? It's sort of like I can't, like, I don't know. It's hard for me, you know, to be like, how do I help someone get in a mindset? Because I'm like, I don't give a shit, you know, like I would partner with you if I'm attracted to you, like, you know, like I don't.
That's a really big deal that you brought up, and I try to dance around saying it, but I do believe that so much of it is how attracted is this person to you. Like, for many of the people that I speak with who are like, oh, I got rejected for having herpes, oftentimes it's like, well, one, were you even really attracted to that person? And were they really attracted to you? Because there's so many people who don't care, and they meet people with, all right, well, what do we need to do in order to minimize the risk?
Right.
Because, yeah, like, there's so many different responses that people can give when someone's like, all right, yeah, I want to move forward with you. You need to know that I have herpes, and here's what things might look like moving forward. A lot of it, whether or not, so I'm looking at the survey results that are coming in as we speak, and one of the questions is, of the number of your disclosures, how often, percentage-wise, would you say a relationship is moved forward sexually? More than, at this point in time, with about 400 responses, 30% of people moved forward more than 90% of the time with the person that they disclosed to. So that kind of, the attraction piece is something that we have to look more at the data when we get it all in. But I do believe that that's a major factor. It's like, okay, this person might not want to have sex with you just because they're not attracted to you. We gotta accept that.
Right.
You know?
Like, it is what it is, right?
We all get that.
Right, yeah. Absolutely.
One more piece to speak on is I'm recognizing, too, another piece of data. This is actually a little bonus piece. I started this podcast in 2017 because I saw that there were people who, after their herpes diagnosis, were expressing suicide ideation. In previous surveys, I've asked about suicidation or suicidality after a diagnosis. This time, I asked about it before. And interesting, it's very close to 50-50. People who had suicidality before their diagnosis and after their diagnosis. So this is kind of like expanding into more of this, like, I've said sexual health is mental health.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And how interconnected our identity is with our sexuality. Once you get that herpes diagnosis, it's like you believe not only is your sex life over, but your life is over because that was where your identity was so strongly tied to. So looking at that statistic and now being able to speak to, you know, this identity component, you know, something that has been done so well, like I talked about Sex Down South, right? Is seeing and stretching the idea of what your identity is in relation to your sexuality. Because I'll ask people all the time, all right, well, what does sex mean to you? What did the relationship that you had to the person who might have exposed you to herpes mean to you? And then we sort of trace that down to some underlying emotion or shame around sex or having to redefine sex. And you know, when people start to understand this is not all sex is, like we're talking about intercourse here.
Right.
And so being able to expand on that has been a very beautiful part of my own growth and experience and what I try and pass on to people who might think their sex life is over just because they can't super freely just hook up and not have these conversations anymore because of this thing that's in their subconscious. So that was very well put together about the pleasure safety component, and I tried to close that loop with the identity piece, but I think I might have got a little lost there.
It's all good.
At this point in time, y'all been listening long enough. Now, this to me is like the most important part of our conversation. Kink as a treatment for trauma. And here's why. Because now, I guess further expanding on the point that I was just trying to make but felt like I couldn't. looking at sex outside of just intercourse. I
Right.
think that we have a very narrow view sometimes of what sex is when we're actually talking about intercourse. When I was in one of the workshops, I heard Honestly Nay say, kink can be a treatment for trauma. Can you speak to that from your experience and from the educator perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I just taught a group. I had a group offering at a retreat called Kink is a Healing Modality. Okay. Right, and so, and I think Rafaela also does this too.
From healing. No,
from Afro-sexology.
Afro-sexology.
So. Kink can be definitely a source of healing for people, especially who have experienced trauma. There has been more than one time where I have actually been able to help people transform their trauma. So actually it happened here in Portland. The last time I was in Portland, what happened was we were doing lessons, and I think I was doing the choking lesson, and the person who wanted me to choke them, had some trauma around choking, but did not disclose that to me. And so after, they demoed and they were fine, everything went fine. And after the demo, they came up to me and they said, I had trauma around choking because, when I was younger and I had some, childhood, sexual trauma. And, but she was like, you doing that so gently just really kind of changed the way that I thought about, choking and breath work and kink. And it was really transformative for me. And so that's happened to me more than once. Another time happened to me at Sex Down South. Like, just the kink that I'm implementing helps people to transform their trauma because they're relating it to whatever behavior act differently. They have a new memory, and the memory is of someone who is safe, secure, who is helping them move through that trauma. It's, Bianca Laureano said this best, like, trauma, it's not enough to be trauma informed, right? It's better to be able to transform someone's trauma. That is what we need because there's so much hurt in the world, right? And so kink, it can be a really great healing modality for healing different kinds of trauma. And I don't think it can be the only healing modality, but I think it can be very, very helpful healing modality, especially people who have suffered from childhood sexual trauma. Because of the elements around consent, because of the elements around safety, security, having someone who is vetted and known and someone you trust, in a controlled environment, all of these things I think contribute to the fact that it can be a healing experience for someone.
I like that you said controlled environment and not necessarily safe environment. That was a very interesting word choice. Can you expand on that? What do we mean controlled environment?
Yeah, controlled environment meaning that there are rules, safety precautions. There's everything from a first aid kit to everything is where you need it to be, right? Okay. And then there's also the aftercare, right? So not only the physical but the emotional aftercare. That's also a part of that experience. So yeah.
Thank you for those examples of the choking for sure, because I think it helps to have some sort of pictures in mind of what that can look like, because I know that what I've heard, and again, this is a potential mechanism for treating trauma and offering healing. It's not the mechanism for treating and healing trauma. But yeah, a lot of times I've been with partners who've said, I like this thing. And in like longer conversations, you learn that there might have been some trauma around it. So being seen as someone who is controlled, I was about to say safe, but giving them the control and the power to rewrite that story
narrative, yeah.
that was that isn't their own story, that was forced upon them. Like, to be able to rewrite that story with a new experience, that is sort of what the healing is. Is that in the ballpark?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think therapists have another, I think they call it like narrative therapy or something like that. Like, they try to like rewrite the story, but I think because therapists in kink are, I mean, lots of therapists are kinky, but like, because there's so many different,
there's lines.
Yeah, the lines, right? I think that aspect of it totally, like you just said, it can really rewrite that story of what pleasure is, and taking your pleasure back, right? In a sense of, like, a lot of times people, when they reenact their kinks, it might be because of a trauma they had, right? So, for instance, I have a friend who loves role play for that reason, right? Loves to role play, daddy boy stuff, right? And it's a way of like, okay, I did experience this type of pleasure, but it was manipulated and coerced, right? But now, as an adult, I can role play and I can take my power back in a consenting experience where I can receive that pleasure in a way that feels good, right? And so I think something like that is really important for people, and people should be able to get into it.
A thought that you just sparked in me is sometimes people's trauma being linked to a turn on. Is that a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because, especially if it's something when you're younger, you find you're finding something pleasurable, or your body responds in a pleasurable way. But then maybe you realize, like, oh, wait a minute, that was inappropriate, or maybe there's some shame, or there's some secrecy attached to it. I think that can be the kicker, right? The issue. And so then when it's as an adult, kind of dealt with in a way that is sort of, out in the open, I guess, for the most part, between you and whoever you're, playing with, I think.
I started laughing because I'm thinking about it. I was like, oh, as I said that, I'm thinking about like the first sexual experiences that I've had, and they like had to be sneaky and like quick get in, get out. Like, anywhere we could get caught, like there's something there. I was like, oh, that's a thing. But also there are components of those first sexual experiences where I'm like, yeah, I didn't like that. I don't really care to do that. But I mean, if that's something that I might not have liked, kink can be a way to rewrite the experience of what I think I don't like from those times. And maybe it can be something that is a turn on. Or I can learn that it's still not a turn on. And decide, all right, I don't want to do this. And it's as simple as that. Like, it's something that can be negotiated with partners. Kink is very self-reflective.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you have to think of it. It's play, right? It's exploration, it's play, and it's play with the taboo, right? It's playing with the secrecy. It's playing with those shadow thoughts. It's, play with all of that. Okay.
How are you on time?
I'm good.
Okay, cool. Yes, looking at it as a form of play, kink as a form of play, I think that people who, and tying this back to the content of the podcast, people who receive a herpes diagnosis lose that sense of being able to play. And being able to, just dip your toe in to what play can now look like in the kiddie pool, right? Versus you had what was that? Like, you thought something. Go ahead. Because I'll ramble. If you let me ramble, I will. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking about how my mom raised me, right? So my mom raised me in a way where she did not want me to be a teenage mom like she was, right? So what she did, she was like, okay, when you get horny, not if you get horny, when you get horny, this is what you do. You go to the store, you buy condoms. I mean, it's very normative. But, you know, you go to the store, you buy condoms, you know, you use those condoms, you know. If you have a UTI, this is what it feels like. If you have a yeast infection, this is what it feels like. If you have BV, this is what it smells like, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, she gave me all of that information. So what she really was teaching me was around sexual responsibility. And she always made it sound like it's just who we are. It's a part of our existence, and it is a part of our play. She said, if you get horny, this is what you do. You know?
Said when you
get horny, this is what you do, right? And so I'm thinking like, okay, I've always gone into sexual situations of like, okay, I'm going into this situation. Who am I playing with? And also, what are my particular needs, right? So I like to be fluid bonded. And so for me, it's like, okay, if I have a partner who has, herpes or HPV or something like that, that is active, I have to think about, okay, well, what are the things that I need to do, because I might not be able to experience a fluid bonding time at this particular moment in time, right? But it doesn't mean I shy away from being with them. So I think part of that is an ingrained piece of pleasure and joy and responsibility, of taking responsibility of my own body.
Yeah. So much of that, what we're talking about in kink, has nothing to do with intercourse. And I'm having a little bit of an aha moment myself, because this does make me think about how much of our existing sex education omits these very critical components that I've learned through kink. So when we talk about kink, being in these settings, what I've learned in queer spaces is about consent, about boundary setting, boundary upholding, boundary honoring, and also if there is a violation, there's some form of accountability as, you know, a barrier to someone who might violate. Whereas you don't really have that in the vanilla world. Like somebody can do something wrong and then dip out and go do it to somebody else.
Yes.
In your local kink community, people know each other.
We report.
Yeah. And then the seeking of support. I think I'm naming off too many things.
It's okay.
Being able to seek support in
Yes.
the event that consent or a boundary is violated.
Absolutely.
None of these things have anything to do with intercourse. These are all just navigating communication skills. And these are things that I believe that if in one of the talks that I've given was called Sexless Sex Ed, teaching youth about sex without teaching youth about sex, without talking to youth about sex. And now that I'm thinking about it, it was a lot of what I've learned from kink and BDSM about negotiations. Before any play takes place, I want to know if this is a safe person. Here's what, you know, a consent violation looks like. Here's how we get consent. And it's like the rules of a game of tag at recess, right? Don't touch me here. Don't hit me. Don't get my clothes dirty.
Right.
If I step out, you're out. If
Right.
you tag, you're in.
Yeah.
If you push me to the ground, I'm telling the teacher.
Right.
The consequences, right?
Right.
It's the same exact thing.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with sex. And I think that if we are able to see these negotiation skills at a more universal basis,
Yes.
I think that...
Like, we're getting there.
Talk to me. What you mean?
Yeah, I think we're slowly getting there. And I think particularly with like vanilla and heterosexual audiences, we're getting there because I get sought out a lot in articles. And so sometimes, yeah, they'll be about kink, but sometimes they're just regular stuff like, why is aftercare important for sex? And I'm like, oh, aftercare is entering like the vanilla sex world. Oh, this is fascinating, right? It's not just about like cuddling, right? Or
leaving
talking.
$20 on a
Here's your aftercare. Here's your dub. Spend it wisely.
The time, clean yourself up. All right.
So yeah, like thinking about how it's slowly, like I believe it's all of these kink principles, communication principles, like you said, are really kind of bleeding into the world of heteronormativity, right? So yeah. Yeah.
Oh, go for it. I feel like I'm put on the spot now. So I know I can keep talking. I know how to keep talking, but I'm like, that was so unexpected. This is a really good point to revisit the survey. So if you haven't already, please visit www.spfpp.org/survey and take the herpes survey. Please, if you're someone who is living with herpes, what we're doing with this data is we are going to figure out the best way to present this data and create resources stemming from the survey responses that we get. This survey was put together by people who have herpes, from people who have herpes, for people who have herpes, to be able to present out into the world of healthcare providers, as well as people in various support groups and communities, for them to be able to use these as disclosure tools, as well as if they're newly diagnosed and don't really have any consistent, accurate resources that reflect our community as it exists today. So your participation is going toward being able to create those resources. And this is just like the minimum you can do to get involved, y'all. Just take this survey. We have IRB approval from Ohio Valley University. Megan, who is listed on the consent form, put this together, made it legit. It's anonymous fully, so you are safe to fill this out to the best of your ability, all right? Thank y'all. I need y'all to do that, please. All right, so now you're back.
Yes. Make sure you give me that information. I can send it to my email list.
All right, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I guess just wrapping this all up, I think that we covered everything that I wanted to cover, and I very much appreciate it. I guess like going back more into my personal experience with Sex Down South, it was really there's a word. I gave a lap dance.
Yeah.
I was so shocked. So
okay.
Let me tell you what happened.
Was it on video? Do we have video?
We do. Yes. Somebody sent me some video. I was like, oh. And I remember because the young lady that I was with, I knew that she danced. I was like, oh yeah, you should go up there and give a lap dance. And then King, who was hosting, he was like, all right, yeah, make sure you bring your partner up here to give a lap dance. Oh yeah,
that's right, yeah.
I sit on stage, sit down and get a lap dance. And he was like, all right, plot twist, y'all gotta dance too. You should have seen the look on my face. I went, oh. I was like, all right, well, we
yes.
But got second place. So
yes.
I ain't gonna say how many people was in it, but second place still sound good. These were great experiences to be in the dungeon, and one thing was I was able to ask for things and also get them. So there was someone who was tying and suspending, and I'm very curious about tying people up. Mm-hmm. And so I asked, I was like, hey, may I watch, and can you think out loud, like say what you're doing or why you're doing it, so that I can like absorb this. And she was like, yeah, I can do that. And then I checked with the person who was being tied to make sure that they were okay with me sitting there, like, looking like I was taking notes, right? And they were okay with it too. But yeah, it was just so nice to be in a space where you can ask for a weird thing, and I use air quotes when I say weird for anybody who is only listening. I use air quotes when I say weird because it's just out of the norm, I guess. And to also be in a space where it was safe to say no to things as well. I think that as somebody who has experienced rejection, rejecting people is so hard. And in these spaces, you manage to create a space where it's safe for you to not only ask for what you need and potentially get it, but also be able to turn down, what's not there without the threat of violence or somebody
right.
Like, fuck you too then.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, well, we created the conference really out of love, we really, because we are all coming from different perspectives, and we are a little bit of each of these things, right? Like, I'm queer, T's not, it's sort of like we're both like non-monogamous, but like I'm monogamous, she's more polyamorous, and, so we really are just trying to give everybody just some grace around the things, just life be lifing, and we have enough stress already in our lives. Like, let's just approach each other with love. And so that's why in our welcome, we always say, hey, if you have a problem with something, like, state it, but like, come with love, come with grace. If someone misgenders you, please come with love, grace, teach them, right? Don't like harp on them. Don't get down on them. We are all learning. We're all learning about so many different things. And if we just come together just on a fucking human level and help each other out, like, we can do this together. We can, change the world in our little communities. And so I think it's just really important for us to really be consistent around the love and grace. And we're actually going to redo our guiding principles to include those things, because a couple of things did pop up this past conference that I definitely don't approve of. So we really have to let people know that, like, this is not the space where you can, like, yell at people because you disagree with their politics or whatever. Like, this is not the space. And so
and just to be clear, like, people who have different views are still in this space and coexisting and able to engage with each other. It's not like everyone here has the same beliefs and you wear your beliefs on your heart. And
right.
It's not like that.
No, no. We all have different beliefs. We all have different political views. And that's okay. We just, like, approach things with love. If you don't understand something, like, approach it with curiosity, rather than hate or just harping on someone for something, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the key aspects of our conferences, and why people feel good enough to be like, I can say no, and I can also approach people and not feel like they're gonna, like, harp on me about something, you know what I mean? And we also express that, like, we what do you call it? Because we talk about intuition, consent being intuitive, in our documents. So it's like, it's very important to us as Black folks. Just, we know when we can touch or hug or and maybe you don't because you're neurodivergent. That's okay. That's okay. But that option is there for the people who are, intuitive or empathic or whatever, right? And so I think it's just really important just to understand how people move in the world is not so black and white. Mm-hmm. and yeah.
This I've been playing with this idea of intentional spaces, and this very much aligns with being an intentional space, especially having created it out of love and understanding that there might be some mistakes made, but mm-hmm. when the intention of it is coming from a place of love, we're able to communicate among one another, learn from one another, approach things with curiosity, and be able to move forward best way possible. So I thank you for this healing space. Speaking of healing space, I appreciated the healing space.
Yes, did you go in?
I did, yeah.
Oh yeah, what did you do?
So I did. I got a massage. That was so nice. I got that as soon as I think I was the first person.
You're like, I'm sorry.
I was like, hold on, what? So I got that, and then there was another time. So something came up, and I was like, man, I'm having a weird thing, and I didn't know what a weird feeling was. So I was like, well, the resource is here. Let me utilize it. Mm-hmm. And I went and I recognized that coming out of
the emotional support.
Yeah, the emotional support. Mm-hmm. So coming out of the worshiping a Black man's body, that space was just like intentionally for Black men, and it was like, oh yeah, I feel great in here. Mm-hmm. And like being surrounded by other Black men and having this space that Mango put together that was for us, walking out of there and then like going back into the real world, it was like, oh shit, back to reality. Like that was just an hour of the day where I was prioritized in that way. And so I talked to one of the emotional support people, and one of the things that he said was, or like he just kind of let me share what I was feeling, and then was like, hey, you can ask for what you need. Because my concern was, oh my God, am I going to spend the rest of my life getting addicted to chasing that feeling that I had in there? And what is that going to look like? And he's like, hey, you can be, like, it's okay for you to have what you want. And I was like, oh, no one's ever said that to me. Right? Or even, I've heard it before, but in different contexts.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Right.
And even then, I'm like, you sure about that? It doesn't feel safe. Like,
yeah.
So I was able to utilize that. And I think that being able to verbalize it in a space where it could be received allowed for me to walk out for the rest of the conference and like not have this pressure build up to where it was alleviating itself through like my behaviors or like going to try and let's say if I were flogging someone, take out my frustration in the flogging, right? So to be able to depressurize in that healing space allowed for me to just go out and continue to enjoy myself as I was enjoying myself.
Yeah, and so, ask for what you need. Like, yeah.
It became easy, but it's a practice. And, you know, I think asking for what you need is a practice, receiving is a practice, showing up for yourself. All of this is a practice. So, this was really good timing. I want to wrap up just leaving you the opportunity to let people know how they can connect with you. And Sex Down South next year is in Jamaica.
No, it's in Atlanta.
Why did I think it was in Jamaica?
We have a pop-up. So we've been doing these pop-ups. So this is part of a project.
I've been telling people
that's in Jamaica. That's okay. It's always in Atlanta for 3 days. This is a new thing that we're doing in Jamaica. It's so we've been doing these pop-ups. We started in 2018. We did a pop-up in Kansas City called Sex in the Middle. And so we wanted to do 2019, didn't quite work out when the pandemic hit. So then we came back for 2023 and we did Sex by Southwest in Tucson. And then we did Sex on the Beach in Miami. And we're hoping to do maybe another one in December, hopefully. But these are part of our kind of new project, Slay Sexual Liberation, Art, and Education. And basically they're kind of like mini Sex Down South. And so it's just like a day long instead of 3 days long. Sort of short sentence, just the education and sort of the party piece. We tried to have like a healing space in Tucson, but didn't quite work out there. But we did kind of have like a quiet space in Miami, but we're still kind of working out all the little kind of mini details. But for the most part, we have Jamaica. That's going to be another pop-up. And we kind of, you know, it's really Tia. She was like, I want like a luxury, you know, we want, she's been wanting to go to hedonism, you know what I mean? So she was like, let's do hedonism. And so we we're doing that in June. And then we're also planning on doing a few other pop-ups. So we might do it again in Miami because Tia really loved Miami. We're going to do one in LA. That will be earlier in the year. And then we'll do one in Houston, I think. Houston, yeah. Because we sent out a survey. We sent out a survey and be like, where do people want to go? And so Houston was another choice that people picked. So so those are on our planning calendars for next year. So we'll see what happens with that and see if we can get some funding.
Is it just SDCon.com? What's the website?
Oh, our website is sexdownsouth.com.
Sexdownsouth.com.
Yeah, and so you can reach us at SDSCon on Instagram and TikTok, and then Sex Down South on Facebook and Twitter. And then we also, and then you can reach me, velvetlipsexed.com and at velvetlipsexed on every platform with sex without the E on every social media platform.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, Marla, this was wonderful. I so appreciate you being flexible. We had the podcast. I straight got ghosted. I got ghosted from the living situation last September. I got ghosted for the podcast recording space that I paid for, but I was able to dispute the charge on my credit card because this lady didn't call me back. I'm gonna look at my notification and see that she ain't even called me back. Hey, Courtney, she texted me 24 minutes ago. We reserved the space for 5 o'clock. She texted me at 6:30, y'all. I just want my money back. I'm just asking for my money back, and we're gonna leave it at that. I'm not gonna leave a bad review. I want to support small businesses. I've been there. I get it. But ain't nobody show up for 20 minutes, and I'm just out here back an hour
30 minutes, yeah.
All right. that concludes this episode of Something Positive for Positive People. Please like, rate, review, share, subscribe to the podcast on all listening platforms. You can always donate at www.spfpp.org to support our advocacy efforts to integrate the lived experiences of people who have navigated an STI diagnosis into sex education resources in order to aid our STI prevention or STI minimization. Damn, I was doing so good. STI minimization intervention program. Jesus. All right. Patreon, www.patreon.com/SPFPP. The survey is live. And we have events that are going to be coming up. So if you visit spfpp.org, go to the events tab, you'll see support groups coming up and some other exciting upcoming events. If we have any workshops that are coming up, you'll see those there. And again, I want to thank our guest Marla Stewart here today. Please check out sexdownsouth.com. And if you can make it, I hope to be able to see you out there next year. I'll be there. Till next time. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This was great. Thank you so much. I think this is going to be super helpful to people who might even be just like on the fence about kink or wanting to get their feet wet. Yeah, this was great.
Have you ever thought about being a donor?
To what?
For babies.
Like a sperm donor?
Uh-huh.
Now I have.
No, yeah.
Well, I guess.
So I guess. Oh, no, we're looking for a donor.
All right, well, talk to me. I already said I wanted to, if I can't be there.